In a small, sleepy town surrounded by vast fields of golden wheat and tall oak trees, there lived an elderly black woman named Mrs. Evelyn Thompson. She was a woman whose presence commanded respect, not because of her height or voice, but because of the quiet dignity she carried with her everywhere she went. Her hair, streaked with silver, was always neatly tied back under a colorful scarf, and her dresses, always floral and modest, spoke of simpler times. Despite her age, Mrs. Thompson's eyes sparkled with curiosity, as though they held countless stories waiting to be told. Every Saturday morning, rain or shine, Mrs. Thompson would rise early, brew herself a cup of strong black tea, and sit by the window overlooking her tiny garden. The sunlight streaming through the curtains seemed to dance on the pages of the book she had been reading the night before. Books were her greatest companions. They transported her to faraway lands, introduced her to new ideas, and reminded her that life was full of endless possibilities. On this particular Saturday, however, something unusual stirred in her heart, a longing for a specific book she had heard about from one of her neighbors. The book everyone was talking about was titled Echoes of Resilience, a gripping tale of courage and survival during the Great Depression. Mrs. Thompson had heard snippets of its story from friends at church, and even caught glimpses of it on television interviews featuring the author. Intrigued, she decided it was time to visit the local bookstore and purchase a copy for herself. With her purse tucked securely under her arm and her favorite floral print dress freshly ironed, she set off toward the center of town. As she walked, she hummed a tune from her youth, feeling the crisp autumn breeze brush against her cheeks. The streets were alive with activity. Children chased each other down the sidewalks, their laughter echoing through the air. Shopkeepers stood outside their stores, arranging fruits, vegetables, and handmade crafts for display. Dogs barked playfully, wagging their tails as people passed by. Everything felt warm and inviting, until Mrs. Thompson reached the entrance of the bookstore. For reasons unknown to her, a strange unease settled in her chest as she pushed open the glass door, the faint chime of the bell announcing her arrival. Inside, the bookstore was a cozy haven filled with towering shelves lined with books of every genre imaginable. The scent of paper and ink mingled with the soft aroma of coffee wafting from a small cafe tucked in the corner. Yet, despite the charm of the space, Mrs. Thompson immediately sensed a shift in the atmosphere. It wasn't anything overt. At first glance, everything appeared normal, but the subtle cues spoke volumes. A young man behind the counter glanced up briefly when she entered, his expression indifferent. Without so much as a smile, he returned to organizing papers scattered across the desk, seemingly uninterested in helping her. Mrs. Thompson hesitated for a moment, unsure whether to approach him or browse the shelves on her own. Before she could decide, two women nearby caught her attention. They were flipping through magazines near the lifestyle section, occasionally whispering to each other. At first, Mrs. Thompson paid them no mind, assuming they were simply discussing their weekend plans or sharing gossip. But then she overheard fragments of their conversation. "Look who's here," one of them said, her tone dripping with mockery. "Probably looking for some bargain bin stuff." The other giggled softly, adding, "I doubt she even knows how to read." Though their words weren't directed at her directly, Mrs. Thompson knew they were talking about her. Heat rose to her cheeks, and for a brief moment, she considered turning around and leaving. But she reminded herself that she hadn't done anything wrong. She was there to buy a book, nothing more. Taking a deep breath, she approached the counter where the young man still sat, engrossed in his task. Clearing her throat gently, she asked, "Excuse me, do you happen to have a copy of Echoes of Resilience?" The young man finally looked up, but instead of offering assistance, his expression turned dismissive. "We don't carry anything like that," he replied curtly, barely meeting her gaze. "You might want to check another store." His tone was cold, almost robotic, as if he couldn't be bothered to give her a proper answer. Mrs. Thompson blinked in surprise, taken aback by his rudeness. She nodded politely, forcing a small smile, and stepped away from the counter. Though she tried to remain composed, the sting of rejection lingered long after she left the store. Walking home, Mrs. Thompson replayed the incident in her mind. She had faced prejudice before. It wasn't uncommon for someone of her age and background, but this encounter felt particularly harsh. Why had the staff treated her so poorly? Was it because of her skin color, her age, the modest clothes she wore? Or perhaps it was simply ignorance, a lack of understanding of who she truly was beneath the surface. Whatever the reason, it left her feeling deeply unsettled. When she arrived home, Mrs. Thompson placed her purse on the kitchen table and stared out the window. Her thoughts drifted to the countless hours she had spent reading books as a child, often borrowing them from libraries or neighbors because her family couldn't afford to buy many. Those books had opened doors to worlds she never dreamed existed, teaching her lessons about kindness, empathy, and resilience. Now, standing in her quiet little house, she realized that the same lessons could apply to her current situation. Maybe this experience wasn't just about being looked down upon. It was also an opportunity to reflect on how she could respond. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm orange glow across the room, Mrs. Thompson made a decision. She wouldn't let bitterness take root in her heart. Instead, she would find a way to turn this negative experience into something meaningful, not just for herself, but for others too. Little did she know, her journey was only beginning, and the lessons she would learn along the way would change, not only her perspective, but also the lives of those around her. The following days passed slowly for Mrs. Evelyn Thompson. She couldn't shake off the memory of her visit to the bookstore, no matter how hard she tried. Every time she thought about the dismissive staff and their unkind remarks, a mix of emotions swirled inside her: sadness, frustration, and even anger. But what troubled her most was the feeling of being invisible, as though her presence didn't matter. It wasn't just about the book. It was about being treated like she didn't belong, like her love for reading and learning somehow made her less worthy in their eyes. On Tuesday afternoon, as Mrs. Thompson watered the flowers in her garden, she noticed a familiar figure skipping down the street. It was Lily, a bright-eyed 9-year-old who lived 2 houses away. Lily often stopped by to chat with Mrs. Thompson, fascinated by the stories the elderly woman told about her childhood. Today, however, Lily seemed unusually excited. "Mrs. Thompson?" she called out, running toward her. "Why do you look so sad? You always smile when I see you." Mrs. Thompson paused, the watering can still in her hand. She hadn't realized her feelings were so visible. For a moment she considered brushing off the question with a simple, "I'm fine," but something about Lily's earnest expression made her reconsider. Kneeling down to meet the girl at eye level, she sighed softly and said, "Well, dear, sometimes people aren't very kind to others. I went to the bookstore last Saturday, and some of the staff weren't nice to me." Lily tilted her head, her brow furrowing in confusion. "Why not? Did you do something wrong?" "No, sweetheart," Mrs. Thompson replied gently. "They judged me before they even got to know me. They saw my clothes, my age, maybe even the color of my skin, and decided I wasn't worth their time." "That's not fair," Lily exclaimed, her cheeks flushing with indignation. "You're the nicest person I know. If they don't treat you right, then they're the ones who are wrong." Mrs. Thompson chuckled softly at the girl's fierce loyalty. "Thank you for standing up for me, Lily. But life isn't always fair, and we can't control how others behave. What matters is how we choose to respond." "But you shouldn't have to face that alone," Lily insisted, crossing her arms stubbornly. "Let me go with you next time. They won't treat you badly if I'm there." Though touched by the offer, Mrs. Thompson shook her head. "That's very sweet of you, but I don't want you to fight my battles for me. Besides, kindness doesn't come from forcing someone to change. It comes from showing them another way." Lily frowned, clearly unsatisfied with the answer. "Then what are you going to do?" Mrs. Thompson straightened up, her expression thoughtful. "I'm not sure yet, but I'll think of something. Sometimes the best lessons are taught without saying a word." Over the next few days, Mrs. Thompson spent hours sitting at her kitchen table, pen in hand, scribbling notes on scraps of paper. At first, she wasn't sure what she wanted to say or how to say it. Should she write a complaint to the bookstore manager, confront the staff directly, or simply let the incident fade into the past? None of these options felt quite right. Then one evening, as she flipped through an old photo album filled with pictures of her younger self, a wide-eyed girl clutching her first library card, inspiration struck. Instead of focusing on anger or blame, Mrs. Thompson decided to share her story, not to shame anyone, but to remind them of the power of books and the importance of treating everyone with respect. She began writing heartfelt letters, each one telling a different chapter of her life. In the first letter, she described how reading had been her refuge during difficult times, especially when she faced discrimination as a young woman. In another, she wrote about the joy of discovering new worlds through books and how they had shaped her understanding of humanity. And in yet another, she shared her belief that every person, regardless of their appearance or background, deserved to be treated with dignity. Her words flowed effortlessly, filled with warmth and wisdom. She didn't mention the bookstore or the staff explicitly, nor did she sign her name. Instead, she framed her letters as gentle reminders of the values that bind us all together: compassion, empathy, and mutual respect. When she finished writing, she carefully folded each letter, slipped them into plain white envelopes, and sealed them shut. The next morning, she tucked the letters into her purse and set off toward the bookstore once again. This time, Mrs. Thompson didn't enter the store, intending to buy anything. Her mission was far more important than purchasing a book. As she stepped inside, the familiar scent of ink and paper greeted her, but the atmosphere felt colder than before. The same young man was behind the counter, looking bored as he scrolled through his phone. The two women who had whispered about her last week were nowhere to be seen. Taking a deep breath, Mrs. Thompson approached the counter and placed the envelopes on its surface, arranging them neatly so they wouldn't go unnoticed. "What's this?" the young man asked, glancing at the envelopes with mild curiosity. "A gift," Mrs. Thompson replied with a warm smile. "Something for you and your colleagues to read when you have a moment. I hope it helps you see the world a little differently." Before he could respond, she turned and walked out of the store, leaving behind a trail of quiet confidence. Though she didn't know it yet, those letters would plant seeds of change in ways she never imagined. Back at home, Mrs. Thompson allowed herself a small sigh of relief. Writing the letters had been cathartic, almost like releasing a weight she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. She knew the outcome wasn't guaranteed. Perhaps the staff would ignore her words entirely, but she also knew that planting seeds of kindness was never wasted effort. Whether or not they chose to nurture those seeds was up to them. As the days turned into weeks, Mrs. Thompson returned to her usual routine. She tended to her garden, baked pies for her neighbors, and continued reading the books she loved. Yet, despite her outward calm, part of her wondered if her gesture had made any difference. Had the staff read the letters? Would they understand the message she had tried to convey? These questions lingered in her mind, but she refused to dwell on them too much. After all, true acts of kindness often unfold quietly, without fanfare or immediate results. One crisp Thursday morning, while walking to the grocery store, Mrs. Thompson ran into Lily again. The girl bounded up to her, her pigtails bouncing with every step. "Guess what?" Lily exclaimed, barely able to contain her excitement. "My mom says the bookstore has changed. People are saying it feels nicer now, like the staff actually care about customers." Mrs. Thompson raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Oh, how so?" "Well, apparently the staff started acting friendlier after finding some anonymous letters," Lily explained. "Nobody knows who wrote them, but they talked about how books bring people together and how everyone deserves respect. My mom thinks whoever wrote them must have been really brave." A slow smile spread across Mrs. Thompson's face. She didn't confirm or deny anything, simply patting Lily on the shoulder. Sometimes bravery isn't about making noise, it's about planting seeds where no one else sees them. Lily looked puzzled for a moment, then grinned. "You're so smart, Mrs. Thompson. I wish I could be like you when I grow up." Mrs. Thompson laughed softly, her heart swelling with pride, not because of what she had done, but because of the ripple effect it had created. Change, she realized, didn't happen overnight. It came in small, steady waves, touching lives in ways both seen and unseen. And though she might never know the full extent of her impact, She took comfort in knowing that her actions had sparked something meaningful. Little did she know, the journey was far from over. Weeks had passed since Mrs. Evelyn Thompson left the anonymous letters at the bookstore, and life in her quiet little town seemed to carry on as usual. The leaves on the trees turned vibrant shades of orange and red, signaling the arrival of autumn. Children played outside after school, their laughter mingling with the crisp air. Neighbors exchanged warm greetings over fences, and the hum of daily routines filled the streets. Yet, beneath the surface, subtle changes were beginning to take root, changes that would soon ripple outward in ways no one could have predicted. Mrs. Thompson, for her part, continued living her life much as she always had. She woke up early, each morning, brewed her tea and spent hours tending to her garden or reading by the window. On Saturdays, she resumed her visits to the bookstore, not out of obligation, but because she genuinely loved being surrounded by books. However, these trips were different now. Each time she entered the store, she noticed small shifts in the atmosphere. The once cold demeanor of the staff had softened. Instead of ignoring customers, they greeted them warmly and offered assistance, without hesitation. During one of her visits, Mrs. Thompson approached the counter to ask about a new release. To her surprise, the young man who had dismissed her weeks earlier was standing there, his expression far more welcoming than before. "Good morning," he said with a polite smile. "How can I help you today?" For a moment, Mrs. Thompson hesitated. Was this the same person who had treated her so rudely? She studied his face carefully, searching for any trace of the indifference she remembered. But all she saw was sincerity. "I'm looking for The Silent River," she replied, naming a novel she'd heard about from a friend. "Ah, yes," the young man exclaimed, turning to scan the shelves behind him. "It's right here." He handed her the book, his movements deliberate and respectful. "It's supposed to be really good. A story about resilience and hope." Mrs. Thompson nodded, her lips curving into a faint smile. "Thank you," she said simply, taking the book from him. As she turned to leave, she couldn't help but notice how differently she felt compared to her previous visit. There was no lingering unease, no sense of being judged or overlooked. Instead, she felt seen, not just as a customer, but as a person, worthy of kindness and respect. Curious about the change, Mrs. Thompson decided to observe the interactions between the staff and other customers during her next few visits. What she saw confirmed her suspicions. Something had indeed shifted. Employees greeted patrons with genuine enthusiasm, recommending books based on their interests and engaging in thoughtful conversations. Even the two women who had mocked her weeks earlier seemed transformed. They smiled warmly at customers and chatted animatedly about their favorite authors. It was as if the entire store had undergone a quiet revolution, one that prioritized connection over judgment. Word of the bookstore's newfound warmth spread quickly throughout the town. People who hadn't visited in years began returning, drawn not only by the wide selection of books but also by the inviting atmosphere. Parents brought their children, eager to instill a love of reading in the next generation. Teenagers gathered in cozy corners discussing their favorite novels over cups of coffee. The store became more than just a place to buy books. It became a community hub where everyone felt welcome. One afternoon, while browsing the shelves, Mrs. Thompson overheard two employees talking near the cafe. One of them held a crumpled piece of paper in her hand, which looked suspiciously like one of the letters Mrs. Thompson had written. "Whoever wrote these must have been really wise," the woman said, her voice tinged with admiration. I mean, it's crazy how much it made me think about how we treat people." Her colleague nodded in agreement. "Yeah, it's like they reminded us why we work here in the first place, to share stories and make people feel valued. I don't know who did it, but I'm glad they did." Mrs. Thompson froze, her fingers brushing against the spine of a nearby book. Her heart swelled with a mix of emotions, pride, relief, and gratitude. She had hoped her words would resonate, but hearing them described as wise and impactful was more than she had dared to expect. For a brief moment, she considered stepping forward and revealing herself, but something stopped her. This wasn't about recognition or praise. It was about planting seeds of change and letting them grow naturally. As she continued browsing, Mrs. Thompson reflected on the power of storytelling, not just in books but in everyday life. Her letters had been a form of storytelling, sharing fragments of her own journey in the hopes of inspiring others. And now, those stories had taken on a life of their own, weaving through the hearts and minds of the people around her. It was a reminder that even the smallest acts of kindness could create waves of transformation. Back at home, Mrs. Thompson sat by the window, sipping her tea and watching the sun dip below the horizon. The golden light bathed her living room in a soft glow, casting long shadows across the walls. She thought about the journey she had embarked upon, the initial hurt, the decision to respond with grace, and the unexpected ripple effects of her actions. Though she had started with a single goal, to address the prejudice she had faced, she realized that her efforts had accomplished so much more. They had sparked a chain reaction, encouraging others to reflect on their behavior and fostering a culture of empathy and understanding. Yet as satisfying as this outcome was, Mrs. Thompson knew the work wasn't done. Change was never a one-time event. It required constant nurturing and effort. Just as a gardener tended to her plants, ensuring they received enough sunlight and water, so too did communities need care and attention to thrive. Inspired by the progress she had witnessed, Mrs. Thompson resolved to continue spreading kindness in her own quiet way. Whether through conversations with neighbors, volunteering at the local library, or simply offering a listening ear to someone in need, she understood that every action mattered. The following Saturday, when Mrs. Thompson returned to the bookstore, she found it busier than ever. Families crowded around the children's section, flipping through picture books and laughing at colorful illustrations. A group of seniors gathered near the history aisle, debating the merits of various biographies. In the center of it all stood the young man who had once dismissed her, now chatting animatedly with a customer about poetry collections. When he spotted Mrs. Thompson, he waved her over with a friendly smile. "Hey, I remember you," he said, his tone warm and familiar. "You're the one who asked about the Silent River last week, right? Did you enjoy it?" Mrs. Thompson nodded, touched by his enthusiasm. "Yes, I did. It was beautifully written." "That's great to hear," he replied. "If you liked that, I think you'll love this new memoir that just came in. Let me show you." As he led her to a nearby shelf, Mrs. Thompson felt a deep sense of fulfillment. This was what she had hoped for, not revenge or vindication, but an opportunity to bridge divides and foster understanding. Through her letters, she had planted seeds of change, and now those seeds were blossoming into something beautiful. Later that evening, as she settled into her favorite armchair with a cup of tea, Mrs. Thompson opened the memoir the young man had recommended. Its pages promised tales of courage, resilience, and the enduring power of human connection. Smiling to herself, she realized that her own story mirrored many of the themes within the book. Life, she mused, was full of challenges and injustices, but it was also brimming with opportunities to learn, grow, and inspire others. And though the road ahead might still hold obstacles, she knew she was ready to face them. One kind act, one heartfelt word, and one open heart at a time. Little did she know, her journey was about to intersect with someone else's in ways that would deepen its impact even further. As the weeks turned into months, the transformation at the bookstore became a topic of conversation throughout the town. People marveled at how much friendlier and more welcoming the staff had become. Customers who had once avoided the store now returned eagerly, sharing stories of their positive experiences with friends and family. Even those who hadn't visited in years were drawn back by word-of-mouth testimonials about the change in atmosphere. Yet despite the growing buzz, no one knew exactly what or who had sparked this shift. The anonymous letters remained a mystery, their author hidden behind a veil of quiet humility. For Mrs. Evelyn Thompson, life continued its steady rhythm. She tended to her garden, baked pies for her neighbors, and spent countless hours immersed in books. Her weekly visits to the bookstore had become something she looked forward to, not just because of the books themselves, but because of the sense of belonging she now felt there. Each trip was a reminder that kindness could transform even the most unwelcoming spaces into places of warmth and connection. Still, she kept her role in the bookstore's transformation a secret, content to let others believe it was simply a collective effort by the staff. One chilly November afternoon, as Mrs. Thompson strolled through the aisles of the bookstore, she noticed a new face among the employees. It was a young woman named Clara, who appeared to be in her mid-20s. With her curly brown hair tied back in a loose bun and a warm smile that seemed to light up the room, Clara stood out immediately. Unlike some of the other staff members who still occasionally slipped into old habits of indifference, Clara radiated genuine enthusiasm for her work. She greeted every customer with a cheerful, "Hello," and went out of her way to recommend books based on their interests. Curious about the newcomer, Mrs. Thompson decided to strike up a conversation during her next visit. As she approached the counter, Clara looked up from restocking a display and beamed. "Good afternoon. How can I assist you today?" Mrs. Thompson smiled back, holding up the novel she had been reading. "I'm almost finished with this one, and I was wondering if you might have any suggestions for what to read next." Clara's eyes lit up with excitement. "Of course. What kind of books do you enjoy? Something heartwarming, adventurous, or maybe something thought-provoking?" "Well," Mrs. Thompson began, tapping her chin thoughtfully, "I've always loved stories about people overcoming challenges. Books that remind us of our shared humanity, you know?" "Absolutely," Clara exclaimed, nodding enthusiastically. "Let me grab something I think you'll adore." She disappeared into the shelves and returned moments later with a book titled Threads of Hope. This one is about a community coming together after a natural disaster. It's beautifully written and full of hope and resilience. I think you'll find it inspiring. Mrs. Thompson accepted the recommendation with gratitude, struck by Clara's passion and insight. "Thank you," she said warmly. "You seem to truly care about helping people find the right books." Clara blushed slightly, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "It's important to me. When I started working here, I found some letters left by an anonymous person. They talked about how books can bring people closer and reminded us to treat everyone with kindness. Those words really stuck with me. I guess they inspired me to try harder, to make sure everyone feels valued when they walk through the door." Mrs. Thompson's breath caught in her throat. Though she didn't show it, hearing her own sentiments echoed back to her was deeply moving. She managed a soft smile and said, "That's wonderful, Clara. Whoever wrote those letters must have been very wise." "They certainly were," Clara agreed, her expression thoughtful. "Whoever it was, I wish I could thank them. Their words changed not just the way we work here, but the way we see the world." Mrs. Thompson nodded silently, her heart swelling with pride and humility. She realized then that her letters had done more than inspire individual acts of kindness. They had created a ripple effect, influencing others to carry the torch of compassion forward. And Clara, with her infectious enthusiasm and dedication, was living proof of that impact. Over the following weeks, Mrs. Thompson made it a point to visit the bookstore regularly, partly to support Clara's efforts and partly to observe the ongoing changes. She noticed that Clara often took the initiative to organize events designed to bring the community together. One Saturday morning, the store hosted a storytelling session for children, complete with colorful decorations and snacks. Another weekend featured a poetry reading where local writers shared their work with an appreciative audience. Each event drew larger crowds than the last, turning the bookstore into a vibrant gathering place for people of all ages and backgrounds. During one such event, a book club meeting focused on themes of resilience and perseverance, Mrs. Thompson found herself sitting beside Clara. The discussion was lively, with participants sharing personal anecdotes and insights inspired by the selected novel. At one point, Clara leaned over and whispered, "This is why I love working here, seeing how books connect people. It's magical." Mrs. Thompson chuckled softly. "Yes, it is. Books have a way of reminding us that we're never alone, no matter what we're going through." Clara nodded, her gaze thoughtful. You know, sometimes I wonder if whoever wrote those letters ever comes here. If they saw how much has changed, I bet they'd feel proud. Mrs. Thompson hesitated for a moment, tempted to reveal the truth. But instead, she simply patted Clara's hand and said, "I'm sure they would." Sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness can create the biggest changes. The comment lingered in Clara's mind long after the meeting ended. Over the next few days, she found herself reflecting on the mysterious letters and their profound influence. Who could have written them? Why had they chosen to remain anonymous? And most importantly, how could she honor their message by continuing to spread kindness in her own life? Inspired by these questions, Clara decided to take things a step further. She proposed an idea to the bookstore manager: a kindness wall where customers could leave notes of encouragement for one another. The concept was simple yet powerful. Anyone could write a message on a sticky note and post it on a designated bulletin board near the entrance. Within days, the wall was filled with heartfelt messages. "You are stronger than you think. Keep shining your light, and your story matters." When Mrs. Thompson visited the store the following week, she paused in front of the kindness wall, her eyes misting with emotion. Among the colorful notes, she spotted one that read, "To the person who inspired us all, thank you for reminding us of the power of compassion." Though unsigned, the message seemed to speak directly to her. For a moment, she allowed herself to savor the feeling of accomplishment, the knowledge that her actions had touched so many lives. But Mrs. Thompson wasn't the only one moved by the kindness wall. Customers often stopped to read the notes, their faces lighting up with smiles or tears of recognition. Some added their own messages, creating a growing tapestry of hope and encouragement. The wall became a symbol of the bookstore's transformation, a testament to the fact that kindness, like a seed planted in fertile soil, could grow into something extraordinary. As winter approached and the days grew shorter, Mrs. Thompson reflected on the journey she had embarked upon. What had begun as a painful encounter at the bookstore had blossomed into something far greater, an opportunity to teach, inspire, and connect. Through her letters, she had not only challenged prejudice, but also ignited a movement of empathy and understanding. And while she may never receive public recognition for her role, she knew that true fulfillment came not from accolades but from making a difference in the lives of others. Yet, as satisfying as this chapter of her life had been, Mrs. Thompson couldn't help but wonder what lay ahead. Would the lessons learned at the bookstore continue to resonate beyond its walls? Could the seeds of kindness she had planted take root in other corners of the community? These questions lingered in her mind, urging her to keep moving forward, one small act of compassion at a time. Little did she know her journey was about to intersect with someone else's in ways that would deepen its impact even further. The winter months brought a chill to the air, but inside the bookstore, warmth radiated not just from the heaters humming softly in the corners, but also from the sense of community that had taken root. The kindness wall continued to grow, its colorful notes spilling over onto adjacent bulletin boards. Customers lingered longer than usual, reading the messages and adding their own contributions. Some even took pictures to share on social media, spreading the spirit of kindness far beyond the walls of the small town. Yet despite the outward success, Mrs. Evelyn Thompson remained an observer, a quiet presence who watched as her initial act of courage blossomed into something much larger. One frosty morning, as Mrs. Thompson prepared for her weekly visit to the bookstore, she received an unexpected knock at her door. Opening it, she was surprised to see Clara standing on her porch, bundled up in a thick coat and scarf, her cheeks flushed from the cold. "Good morning, Mrs. Thompson," Clara greeted her warmly. "I hope I'm not disturbing you at all, dear," Mrs. Thompson replied, stepping aside to invite her in. "Come in out of the cold. Would you like some tea?" "That would be lovely, thank you," Clara said, brushing snowflakes from her shoulders as she entered the cozy living room. As Mrs. Thompson busied herself in the kitchen, preparing a pot of her favorite herbal tea, Clara glanced around the space. The walls were adorned with framed photographs of smiling faces, family members, friends, and neighbors, and shelves lined with books of every genre imaginable. It was clear that this home belonged to someone who cherished stories and connections. When they settled down at the kitchen table, steaming mugs in hand, Clara hesitated for a moment before speaking. "Mrs. Thompson, I wanted to ask you something. You've been coming to the bookstore for as long as I've worked there, and I've noticed how much you seem to care about books and people. Have you ever thought about sharing your own story?" "My story?" Mrs. Thompson repeated, raising an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "Well," Clara explained, leaning forward earnestly, "we're planning a special event next month, a storytelling night where members of the community can talk about their experiences and what inspires them. I think your perspective would be incredibly valuable. You've seen so much change both in the world and in our little bookstore. Your words could inspire others to keep spreading kindness." Mrs. Thompson sat back in her chair, considering the request. She had always preferred listening to others rather than being the center of attention. But Clara's enthusiasm was infectious, and the idea of sharing her journey, not for recognition, but to encourage others, resonated deeply with her. After a long pause, she nodded slowly. "All right, Clara. I'll do it, but only if you promise to help me prepare." Clara beamed, clapping her hands together. "Of course, this is going to be amazing." Over the next few weeks, Mrs. Thompson and Clara met regularly to plan her presentation. They pored over old photo albums, discussing key moments in Mrs. Thompson's life, the hardships she had faced, the lessons she had learned, and the joys she had experienced along the way. Together, they crafted a narrative that wove together personal anecdotes with universal themes of resilience, empathy, and hope. Though Mrs. Thompson initially felt nervous about speaking publicly, Clara's unwavering support gave her confidence. Finally, the evening of the storytelling event arrived. The bookstore was packed with people of all ages, eager to hear the stories of their neighbors. Chairs were arranged in neat rows, and a small stage had been set up near the cafe. As each speaker took their turn, the audience listened intently, laughing, nodding, and sometimes wiping away tears. When it was Mrs. Thompson's turn, she stepped onto the stage with a calm grace that silenced the room instantly. "Good evening, everyone," she began, her voice steady and warm. "My name is Evelyn Thompson, and I'd like to share a story about the power of kindness and the importance of seeing one another as equals." She spoke candidly about her experience at the bookstore, the dismissive staff, the whispered judgments, and the hurt she had felt. But instead of dwelling on the negativity, she focused on how she had chosen to respond. She described writing the anonymous letters, planting seeds of change without expecting anything in return. And finally, she shared how those seeds had grown into something beautiful, transforming not just the bookstore but the entire community. "When I left those letters," she concluded, her eyes scanning the attentive faces before her, "I didn't know what would happen. All I knew was that I wanted to remind people of our shared humanity. We are all connected by our struggles, our dreams, and our capacity for compassion. If my story teaches you anything, let it be this: kindness is never wasted. Even the smallest act can create ripples that reach farther than we imagine." A wave of applause erupted as Mrs. Thompson stepped off the stage, her cheeks flushed with emotion. People approached her afterward, thanking her for her honesty and wisdom. Many admitted that her words had moved them to reflect on their own lives and relationships. Among them was the young man who had once dismissed her so rudely. He stood, awkwardly at first, then extended his hand. "Thank you, Mrs. Thompson," he said sincerely. "Your letters changed my perspective. I'm sorry for how I treated you before. I promise to do better." Touched by his apology, Mrs. Thompson accepted his handshake with a gentle smile. "We all make mistakes," she replied. "What matters is learning from them and growing." The evening marked a turning point for Mrs. Thompson. For years, she had carried her experiences quietly, choosing to lead by example rather than seeking acknowledgement. But now, she realized the value of sharing her story openly, not to boast or gain praise, but to inspire others to embrace kindness and understanding. Her words had planted new seeds in the hearts of those who heard them, ensuring that the cycle of compassion would continue. In the days that followed, the impact of the storytelling night rippled through the town. Inspired by Mrs. Thompson's message, residents began organizing initiatives to promote unity and inclusivity. A local school launched a program encouraging students to write letters of gratitude to teachers, classmates, and family members. A group of volunteers started a free library box outside the community center, stocked with donated books for anyone to borrow. Even businesses joined in, displaying signs reminding customers to treat each other with respect and empathy. At the ideal heart of these efforts was Clara, whose passion for fostering connection had grown exponentially since meeting Mrs. Thompson. She often visited the elderly woman's home, bringing updates about the projects taking shape across town. "It's incredible," Clara said during one such visit. "People are realizing that kindness isn't just something we do, it's who we are. And it all started with you." Mrs. Thompson shook her head modestly. "No, dear. It started with all of us. I may have planted a seed, but it's the community that has nurtured it into something extraordinary." Though humble, Mrs. Thompson couldn't deny the profound sense of fulfillment she felt. Her journey, from feeling invisible to becoming a catalyst for change, had taught her invaluable lessons about resilience, courage, and the enduring power of human connection. Yet, as she gazed out her window at the snow-covered streets, she knew her work wasn't done. There would always be opportunities to spread kindness, to lift others up, and to remind the world of the beauty found in treating everyone with dignity and respect. Little did she know, however, that her influence was about to extend even further. Across the country, news outlets picked up the story of the small-town bookstore transformed by anonymous letters and a community united by compassion. Journalists reached out, hoping to interview the mysterious author of the letters, while Mrs. Thompson declined their requests, preferring to remain behind the scenes. Her story inspired countless readers to take action in their own communities. From classrooms to corporate offices, people began leaving notes of encouragement, organizing acts of service, and finding ways to bridge divides. And so, Mrs. Evelyn Thompson's legacy grew, not because of fame or recognition, but because of the quiet, steadfast belief that every person has the power to make the world a kinder place. As the weeks turned into months, the ripple effects of Mrs. Evelyn Thompson's actions continued to spread far beyond her small town. What had begun as a personal response to an act of prejudice had grown into a movement, a testament to the enduring power of kindness and the human spirit. News of the transformed bookstore and its anonymous letters reached people across the country, sparking conversations about compassion, empathy, and the importance of treating others with dignity. Social media platforms buzzed with stories inspired by Mrs. Thompson's example, as individuals shared how they were incorporating small acts of kindness into their daily lives. Despite the growing attention, Mrs. Thompson remained steadfast in her decision to stay out of the spotlight. She declined every interview request that came her way, politely explaining that she preferred her story to speak for itself. "It's not about me," she told Clara when the young woman urged her to reconsider. "It's about what we can all do together. If my actions inspire someone else to be kind, then that's enough for me." Clara couldn't help but admire Mrs. Thompson's humility. In a world obsessed with fame and recognition, the elderly woman stood apart, a beacon of quiet strength and selflessness. Determined to honor her mentor's wishes, Clara took it upon herself to share the broader message without revealing Mrs. Thompson's identity. She gave interviews on behalf of the bookstore, emphasizing the transformative power of community and the role that anonymous gestures could play in fostering change. Sometimes, Clara would say during these appearances, the most impactful acts are the ones done quietly, without expecting anything in return. Back in the town, life carried on much as it always had, but with a renewed sense of purpose. The bookstore remained at the heart of this transformation, serving not only as a place to buy books, but also as a hub for connection and growth. Storytelling nights became a regular occurrence, drawing participants from neighboring towns who wanted to share their own experiences and learn from others. The kindness wall expanded, eventually covering an entire section of the store, its colorful notes forming a mosaic of hope and encouragement. Customers often remarked that visiting the bookstore felt like coming home, a sentiment that would have been unimaginable just a year earlier. Mrs. Thompson, meanwhile, found joy in observing these changes from the sidelines. Her weekly visits to the bookstore were no longer solitary excursions. They were opportunities to connect with friends both old and new. She developed a close bond with Clara, who visited her frequently to update her on the latest developments. Together, they discussed ways to keep the momentum going, brainstorming ideas for new initiatives that could strengthen the community even further. One such initiative was born during a particularly snowy afternoon, when Mrs. Thompson and Clara sat by the fireplace sipping hot cocoa and flipping through old photo albums. As they reminisced about the past, Mrs. Thompson mentioned how books had been her refuge during difficult times, how they had taught her about resilience, understanding, and the beauty of diverse perspectives. Inspired by this conversation, Clara proposed starting a book bridge program where residents could donate gently used books to be distributed among schools, shelters, and libraries in underserved areas. The idea quickly gained traction. Volunteers poured in to help organize book drives, sorting donations and delivering them to communities in need. Mrs. Thompson played a key role in selecting titles that emphasized themes of hope, perseverance, and unity. These books aren't just stories, she explained to Clara as they packed boxes one evening. They're lifelines, for children dreaming of brighter futures, for adults seeking solace, for anyone looking to find themselves within the pages. The impact of the Book Bridge program was profound. Schools reported increased student engagement, teachers expressed gratitude for the additional resources, and families wrote heartfelt letters thanking the donors for their generosity. One note in particular caught Mrs. Thompson's eye. It read, "Thank you for reminding us that we are never alone. These books have given our family a reason to smile again." Holding the letter in trembling hands, Mrs. Thompson felt tears welling up in her eyes. This was why she had started everything, to remind people of their worth, their potential, and their ability to overcome adversity. Yet amidst all the progress, Mrs. Thompson remained acutely aware of the challenges that still existed. Prejudice, judgment, and inequality hadn't disappeared overnight. They lingered in subtle forms, waiting to resurface if vigilance waned. But rather than feeling discouraged, she saw this as a call to action. Change, she realized, wasn't a destination. It was a journey, one that required constant effort, reflection, and collaboration. And so she resolved to continue planting seeds of kindness wherever she went, knowing that even the smallest gestures could make a difference. Her resolve was tested one spring morning when a stranger arrived at her doorstep. He introduced himself as Marcus, a journalist from a national magazine. Though hesitant at first, Mrs. Thompson invited him inside, curious about his intentions. Over tea, Marcus explained that he had traveled across several states interviewing people whose lives had been touched by acts of kindness inspired by her story. "You've created something extraordinary," he said earnestly. "I want to capture that, not for sensationalism, but to show the world what's possible when we choose empathy over indifference." Though flattered, Mrs. Thompson reiterated her desire to remain anonymous. "The focus should be on the lessons, not the person behind them," she insisted. Marcus respected her wishes, agreeing to write an article highlighting the broader movement rather than singling her out. When the piece was published weeks later, it resonated deeply with readers, prompting thousands to reflect on their own capacity for kindness. By summer, the town had become a symbol of hope and transformation. Tourists began visiting, eager to see the bookstore and its famous kindness wall for themselves. Local businesses thrived, benefiting from the influx of visitors while maintaining the charm and authenticity that made the town special. Residents took pride in their community, working together to ensure that everyone felt welcome and valued. For Mrs. Thompson, the culmination of this journey came during a community celebration held in the park. Families gathered under colorful tents enjoying food, music, and laughter. Children ran barefoot through the grass, clutching balloons and handmade crafts. At the center of it all stood a stage, where speakers took turns sharing stories of resilience and gratitude. When Mrs. Thompson's name was announced, the crowd erupted into applause, urging her to step forward. Reluctantly, she approached the microphone, her heart pounding with emotion. "I didn't set out to change the world," she began, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. "I simply wanted to respond to unkindness with kindness, judgment with understanding, and division with connection. What I've learned along the way is that none of us are alone in this journey. We all have the power to plant seeds of change. And when we nurture those seeds together, miracles happen." As she stepped away from the stage, tears streaming down her face, Mrs. Thompson was enveloped in hugs from friends, neighbors, and strangers alike. For the first time, she allowed herself to fully embrace the magnitude of what she had accomplished, not for accolades or praise, but because she had dared to believe in the goodness of humanity. In the years that followed, Mrs. Thompson's legacy continued to grow. The bookstore became a model for other communities seeking to foster inclusivity and compassion. Schools adopted the Bookbridge program, ensuring that every child had access to stories that inspired and uplifted. And though she eventually slowed down, spending more time tending to her garden and reading by the window, Mrs. Thompson remained a guiding light, a reminder that even in moments of injustice, there is always an opportunity to teach, inspire, and grow. Her final lesson came not through words but through actions. On a crisp autumn morning, as golden leaves danced in the breeze, Mrs. Evelyn Thompson passed away peacefully in her sleep. The town mourned her loss deeply, but her memory lived on in the countless lives she had touched. At her memorial service, attended by hundreds, Clara delivered a eulogy that captured the essence of the woman who had changed them all. "Mrs. Thompson taught us that kindness isn't just an act, it's a way of being," Clara said, her voice breaking with emotion. "She showed us that even the smallest seeds planted with love and care can grow into forests of hope. And though she may no longer be with us, her spirit will forever guide us toward a brighter, kinder future." As the sun set over the town that evening, casting long shadows across the streets, the bookstore glowed warmly in the distance, a testament to the power of one woman's courage and compassion. Inside, the kindness wall stood as a living tribute to her legacy, its notes whispering a timeless truth. We are all connected. Every act of kindness matters.